reflection and applying it to my own life and the way that I saw communities functioning. And I started to really try to use that to solve problems. I was very inspired by ideas like the bacterial nodules, but as well as the way symbiosis functions in lichen, as well as many other fungal components, in which I'm getting into today, which would be mycorrhizae. Who here knows generally what mycorrhizae is? So we have a good collection of people. Would anybody like to volunteer to fill in other members of the group on what mycorrhizae is in a very simple definition? I can do it, but I'd like to leave that up to Andy. Zach, could you read that?
It's a fungal connections between the roots of trees, where the trees can communicate with each other and share things like nutrients.
Awesome. Thank you. That's a really clear definition. If you didn't hear Zach, mycorrhizae is defined by a sense of relationship. It is a symbiotic relationship between not only the roots of trees, but other plants as well. And not all plants have them, but 90% of the plant growth is in this symbiotic relationship with a fungal component, and that relationship is called mycorrhizae. This is very inspirational to me because of this mycorrhizal connection within the roots of these plants in the forest. It creates a sense of sustenance and survival that would not otherwise be capable without. And I see that always reflecting into my own life and my community, and seeing how are these connections and symbiotic relationships making my community stronger, and what does that mean, and what is that strength being used for? So for a moment, I would like you all to turn and talk to a buddy or maybe a couple of partners, and I want you to ponder not only what are the symbiotic relationships in your community, but contemplate what is the sense of increased intelligence that you can gain from that relationship? Is that clear enough for everybody? Is anybody kind of unclear as to what I'm asking?
So, like, what increase of intelligence we can gain from our symbiotic relationships?
Right, perhaps. Okay. How might you be more intelligent out of this symbiotic relationship in your community? And don't necessarily limit yourself to that binary of human versus nature. Your community, mind you, is extended into all of the organisms that you are connected with in symbiosis. With people and contemplate that and throw that around for just a few minutes.
I think within my the human part of my community, those relationships always like bring me to like a deeper level of understanding of like someone else's experience, which then makes everything like way cooler because I'm not judging someone maybe, or yeah, it just gives like me a more holistic view of not only my friends but everyone else around me. And then it's really nice to have some friends that are there with me and hold me down.
Hold me up, hold me down.
Oh yeah, either way, it's everyone you need.
The first thing I thought of was like being here and like how great it is that there's some people here who have like a heavy science background, and some people have like a more like educational background, and some people are just like not
when
either.
you're not necessarily like teaching them anything,
floating around here, which is like me. But like because we all have different skills and different abilities, it really brings us together. And also thinking about like trees and that we breathe and flowers and pretty things, and food.
Oh yeah, there's no
First thing I thought of, sorry for interrupting, but is my roommate really likes baking bread or like making baked goods, but she'll make more than she can eat by herself, so I'm like willing volunteer to eat it.
Thank you.
That is symbiotic.
Emily?
We were talking about like how we can like when we're just like walking, if we like listen to what songbirds are chattering about, like they're communicating to each other, but we can also glean knowledge from that. So if they all like stop for some reason, we like might notice that and like wonder what's going on and kind of pay a little more attention, or there's like if you know your bird calls, you can like, I don't know, kind of like know what's kind of beyond and like the broader than just where you are, like what's going on like around those trees if you're listening.
I love that. So by understanding what we can perceive the dialogue of birds, we can have a better understanding of what's actually going on in this greater sphere. Is that kind of what you're saying? Mm-hmm. Awesome. I know Bryce raised.
Oh yeah, mine was very much along the same lines, but more on like the human part of just like when you do have a really great and like reciprocal relationship with someone that you get to learn like about their experiences, and it gives you this new kind of lens, and you see things more holistically, like not only in that relationship but throughout your entire community and even farther than that.
So through our like symbiotic human relationships, we can broaden our perspectives and see multiple angles on things. Yeah. Does that sound right?
Yeah, definitely.
Very cool. So would anybody else like to share before we continue? I have a poem I'd like to share with you. It's actually called The Nimbleness of Intelligence. It's by Jana White. How many times will I shed raw in return? Or is it a stronger current, amorphously assembling and deconstructing, in circuitous layers of attendance, as I unwittingly rally behind the porosity of thought, the seduction of knowledge? I am a small planet, a symbiotic microbial world. My mind's peripheral orbit has flung so far out in its trajectory that now my axis seems nearly invisible. But I can still feel it, this bright nucleus of love, teeming with life, tepid-fleshed, soft, and juicy. I navigate through this microbial stew with winged thoughts, a heart that prisms lightning, and opposable dancing thumbs, exploring this finely tuned internal edge, tingling with the emotive tracings of new frontiers. While underground the nimbleness of intelligence arises in quietude, reverent listening, patiently listening, for openings of emergent steam, clear signs of the heart engagement. I look out there, from inside, the swarming warmth, positioning myself in the spaces in between, practiced in resistance to the consistent hum of patterns and static. The quietude continues to rise from its circuitous path, this time through the soles of my feet, rising to the opening in my sky when I hear, out here, not out there. Where? We are right here. We're all right here, playing in the fields of wild light. There, I would like to invite you all to come and explore some mycorrhizal networks that we have found in the forest, and to think about ways that those networks are creating these intense connections to create this nimbleness of intelligence between multiple beings to create strength. We'll just do that first. Jana White. What I have for you here are hand lenses. And I'm going to pass these out, and then I will show you a way in which we can find mycorrhizal networks. I would like you all to continue this with a mindfulness of trying to have the least amount of impact possible. And one way that we can do that is what we're going to do is uncover a little bit of the detritus on top of the soil, and then make sure when you're done, put it back. As you're doing this exploration, I want you to think about what you're observing with your senses. What are you seeing and feeling? And what do you think is being transferred through these networks? There's been people who've referred to this as a parallel of the internet. And so if you kind of think about that, what do you think is being transitioned through these networks between the plants, and how is it helping it survive? Does anybody have any questions on this? We're all ready? Okay, I guess I will just pass this bag and you can grab one, and once you have a hand lens, you can meet me over there, and I'll know that you're ready to go. And the girl's on one side. And if you could use that to navigate in the forest.
I heard in SpongeBob it goes toward city? So like civilization north.
SpongeBob is a very reputable source.
Yeah.
I think that. We want want to maybe come up a little closer so you can see the base of the tree, or this won't make any sense. Before I show you how to do this, I want to give you a couple other little things to watch out for. If you see this baldish spot in the forest right there at the base of these cedars, that's actually a fairy ring with tiny little mushrooms in it, so be careful not to tromp them. And then if you look around, there's lots of these patches of these very soft little triangular leaves, and these are wild ginger, so careful not to tromp those either.
Yes.
Getting you? Yeah, they're rhizomes under the ground. But for now, I'm going to show you how to find the hyphae. And I want you to kind of do this inquisitively and try to figure out who's connected to whom and why, and who maybe is not connected. So it's a very specific level here that we've been finding it at. Maybe it was further back. Up in here. Oh, it's funny. I thought it was right there. Do you see this white webby stuff? So this is the great transitional information network of the forest, a little piece of it. And so I encourage you to wander in this space and uncover around places where fungus would be. And for those of you who might be unfamiliar with the habits of fungus, they are great decomposers. So they're gonna love hanging out around things that are dead and dying. But mycorrhizae in specific are very much, like I was mentioning, symbiotic members of root systems. So they're always gonna be very likely found around the root bases of most trees and other plants as well. So one of the largest organisms in the world is a hyphae network. So you can imagine they're not just going to be isolated to specific plants, but they're most likely a giant carpet of information transferring under your feet right now. So take your time to go explore around places, be mindful of our impact, and try to return things the way that you found them. And then I'll call you back.
Like fuzz there, like is that still the same? Or
This looks like it could be a mold or a different type of. This is really weird. I've never seen this. This is definitely some sort of something breaking this down, but I would not say that it is hyphae.
okay. So like definitely looking for that stringiness.
Yeah. So notice where you're uncovering this and what this is.
Yeah.
This is a cedar bark tree.
Okay.
Right? So then go explore other plants and see if you can, or maybe a couple more cedars, and see if you see a trend in where they're growing.
I think Rose, when she was talking about her lesson, talked about they're super antifungal, antimicrobial.
Mm-hmm. So they are one of our.
Take forever to break down.
They're one of our few trees in the forest that don't create. They don't need it. They are badass.
Until you get them in focus, yeah. Oh, I see.
The brain of the forest.
I'd love to hear about your thoughts and your discoveries on what you found under the dirt. I believe we can have room for a couple people to give like a couple words each, so I can open up that space but still respect our time restraints. Does anybody feel like they're inclined to do that? Yeah.
They were fuzzy.
Fuzzy. No. Veal. Veal. Ooh. That's how you say it, right? I like that.
I didn't find them at the base of cedars.
Not at the base of cedars. Okay. Excellent. Well, so as far as the functioning of this, I'll let you know a couple of things. Sometimes I did find some at the base of cedars, which don't actually create a mycorrhizal relationship, but what would they be doing around the detritus surface of that cedar is that the fungus releases an enzyme in which it breaks down this organic matter to create accessible nitrogen and phosphorus for the plants to access. And if they weren't doing that, it would take an enormous amount of time for this material to break down, and our world would look drastically different. In return, the plants are photosynthesizing, and they're creating sugars that they're releasing through their roots and then feeding the fungus in return, creating that symbiotic relationship. As far as the increase of intelligence goes, there's a lot of aspects to that. There are a huge connected network of communication in which if there is a fungus invader that's coming in on that end, they can transfer that information in this underground network theoretically, and the plants on the other side can then start releasing toxins and enzymes to defend themselves against that attacker. This is an extremely understudied science. It's very new information, all of this. It wasn't until very recently that we thought that the soil was just filled with roots, and that was that. And more in recent times, we're finding that this mycorrhizal network is one of the most quintessential assets to the forest's success. And on top of that, you have to think about how this can be utilized. There is a person,
Paul
Stamets. I just wasn't sure what the title was of Paul Stamets.
He's in research.
Okay, yeah, and what he is doing is planting mycorrhizal networks in deforested lands, because by having it there, it increases the soil's capacity to retain moisture, and because of the way that it networks to defend against invaders, there is a hugely decreased necessity for pesticides and fertilizers, because it also transfers nutrients throughout the network. For example, if there is a larger tree that is creating a bunch of shade and a smaller tree is growing up next to it and it can't get enough light, that larger tree can actually give it nutrients to get bigger through the mycorrhizal network. And so you can imagine the advantages that we can see with this in our human communities, not only through these literal ways, like how we could use this in agriculture and foresting to create more efficient systems, but also just how you can think about how efficient that is and how we can mirror that in our human communities and our other different dynamics of our communities to communicate and to share resources and to help everybody survive and be stronger. And in many ways we do that, and we have been doing that for a very long time. But I'd like to see when communities struggle, it's probably because this network is getting broken apart. That's my thought. So thank you all for your attention. That was fun. Do we have time for a few